program. So we're actually going to be welcoming a cohort of about 7 social work interns into our DA office starting in the fall. We are excited about what that means for the services that we can give to our victims. We've started a community outreach initiative, and you're going to be hearing a lot more of that in the upcoming weeks. We've also started our internal office audit, and phase 1 is doing an assessment and evaluation of the pre-trial diversion program that we actually have in the office. Not many people knew about it, but that's because we need to expand it and to make it even better than what it was before. We've reconvened the grand jury in Oconee, something that had not been done since COVID closed down our courts. They started last week, and the Athens grand jury will be beginning again in April. And I just want to do a shout out and thank all the people who are volunteering to become our grand jurors. This is so important at this time. I know people were a little concerned about COVID and coming back together, but we've put a lot of COVID precautions in place. So I don't want you to feel concerned about serving on a grand jury or serving on a jury, because the truth is, without you, the community members serving as these jurors, we cannot have these jury trials. They must be done in person, and this is the way that we are able to bring justice. So please, if you get that call, don't just dismiss it, right? Please join us as we go into the courts. We're 2/3 of the way in completing an office reconstruction and logistics process for more efficient use of the space that we have and to help prepare us for growth. And then in putting out all the fires that happen every day, speaking with victims and witnesses and defense attorneys, speaking at events just like this, a zillion Zoom meetings. I'm sure you have as much Zoom fatigue as I do, and a lot more. You can think that, yes, I am very tired. But that's just a little bit of what we've actually been able to accomplish, and we look forward to doing so much more for our community. And all of this shows that when there is a true willingness to criminal justice reform by those who actually are in power, who have the authority to make the changes that we need to be made, it can be done. And we are doing so intentionally, effectively, and efficiently. Which brings me to why a panel like what we're going to listen to tonight is so important. When I first heard author Andrea Dennis speak at an Avid Bookshop event over a year ago regarding her work and her book, Rap on Trial, I knew that that was going to become an essential tool in the toolbox that I would bring with me to the district attorney's office. And believe it or not, I've already had the opportunity to speak with one of my ADAs in which he had a case that he wanted to use rap lyrics in that case as evidence. And I said, wait a minute, I took out Professor Dennis's book and we went through it. We sat there and I said, I want you to look at this chapter and I want you to look at this and I want you to read this and let's talk about this. And I know that that is just one of the many conversations that I will have with people in my office. And so I am personally grateful that Andrea Dennis has done that work and is here. And that's not to mention the other 2 great panelists who are here with her as well, Mariah Parker, Commissioner, and Montu Miller. So please, I'm asking all of you, take a listen now to this distinguished panel that's about to be presented to you, because there is so much for all of us to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, District Attorney Gonzalez. We'll now turn to the panel portion of today's event. Our panelists are Andrea Dennis, Associate Dean for Faculty Development and John Bird Martin Chair of Law at the University of Georgia School of Law. Andrea is also a co-author of the book Rap on Trial, Race, Lyrics, and Guilt in America. Our next panelist is Montu Miller, founder of Ath Factor Liberty Entertainment, hip-hop artist and local Athens activist. And last but not least is Mariah Parker, Athens Clark County Commissioner for District 2, activist and hip-hop artist by the name of Lingua Franca. My name is Sam Hamilton, and I'm the legal fellow in the First Amendment Clinic at the University of Georgia School of Law, and I've been running the clinic's Rap on Trial project for the last 2 semesters. Many thanks to clinic students Janae Alexander and Nabroz Tharani for helping to prepare today's event. So I'd like to start us off by thinking about this passage. It comes from an amicus brief filed with the United States Supreme Court in the case Pennsylvania versus Jamal Knox. It reads, "The rise of hip hop, and specifically rap music, is the single most important event that has shaped the musical structure of the American charts since the 1960s, leading to a music revolution more influential than any other over the last half century." And this brief was filed on behalf of several famous artists, including rap artist Killer Mike, Chance the Rapper, Meek Mill, Yo Gotti, Fat Joe, Mad Skills, 21 Savage, and Jaziri X. And so, Montu, I'd like to start with you. Can you talk about the significance of hip hop in American history?
Wow. That's a big one. I'll just say, I mean, hip hop was born in the early 70s, and as some people know, some don't know, it even extends further back than that. I mean, we're talking about being able to toast and get live and just really influence the fabric of America for a very long time. So it's like hip hop came and it's the form that black expression took during that time. And it's funny that we're having this conversation because it's the most influential art form globally, and we're still having the same conversation about rap being on trial. You know, although it wasn't on trial, same thing happened with jazz. I mean, same thing happened with the slaves didn't used to be able to even play their drums, so they've always tried to criminalize our culture. Anything that we do to express ourselves, anything we do just to be, like just us being a presence in this country, they tried to criminalize it and marginalize it and put us to the side and make it something that's really not. So it's time for us really to understand what hip hop is, understand what rap is, understand what this everything that's going on, because it's a part of our culture. Like it's a part of the fabric of America right now. The kids are listening to it. There's hip hop pedagogy right now going on in the universities and schools, and there's a lot going on. So hip hop is a major business right now. Hip hop is a major culture right now. It cannot be avoided. So we need to move beyond just having this, using rap lyrics to put people in prison. And I don't know if that answered your question, but you know.
Mariah, do you have anything to add?
When I think about the rise of hip hop as a cultural movement and the way that it has been somewhat of a revolution over the last half century in this country, and then with that, the threat that it has been perceived as, to particularly folks involved in the criminal justice system, and seeing it as a site for us to for mass incarceration to sort of extend its tendrils into and draw people into its web. I think about one of the threats of the rise of hip hop being the fact that it replaced a lot of former Black movements for liberation in terms of the way people organize their communities. As the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement began to recede in the 1970s, folks, similarly to how they would march for civil rights or, organize like the Black Panthers did around community food programs and education programs, folks were taking to the streets in places like the Bronx to reclaim the physical spaces of their neighborhoods that had been underinvested in, that were crumbling under austerity politics and globalization as jobs were shipped overseas, to reclaim those spaces physically with their presence in the form of block parties where people would break and DJ and have rap battles and have, show off what graffiti they had in their Black books, as a way of reasserting their authority over a space where the government had left them behind. And so I think seeing that collective power of people not only taking to the streets en masse, but reclaiming their own narratives of what their lives were like. We hear a lot of times people talk about, even politicians like Marco Rubio have been quoted saying, rap is the CNN of the hood, because it is very journalistic in just conveying to the suburbs to folks in Washington, what the conditions are on the ground in these urban communities, and allowing opportunity for hip hop artists to tell their own story rather than have one imposed upon them. Say, yo, this is what I saw. When you got Grandmaster Flash in the message saying what he saw on the sidewalks or in the hallways of a broken down apartment building, people drinking, living out in the streets, this kind of stuff. Like, being able to tell their own stories. I think when you couple those realities of what hip hop meant to Black people in its early, its nascent era, that was a huge threat to folks who had fled urban areas for the suburbs because they're scared of Black people during integration, and it is now being used against us in the form of actually taking rap lyrics, taking that reporting. People are the hip hop journalists like Kendrick Lamar, Killer Mike are, putting out on the airwaves and using that as fodder to feed the system of mass incarceration that that has evolved from what slavery once did and once was with regards to the subjugation of Black people. And so I think that hip hop as a political force, both with regards to community organizing, but also with regards to the way it shaped public policy since the 1960s and 1970s, is definitely not one to be overlooked. But I'm really thankful for folks who are delving into the ways that particular link between carcerality and hip hops, and the way that these lyrics are being put on trial, and the way that Blackness is being put on trial because of its being showcased through hip hop music, bringing it into communities who otherwise would not see what life is like for us out here in these streets, is a really important analysis for us to take in order for us to undo systems like mass incarceration.
So Mariah and Montu, you're both hip hop artists. Can you talk more on a personal level? What does hip hop mean to you, and what does it mean to be a hip hop artist in a town like Athens, which is known for its music scene, but maybe not necessarily for its hip hop scene, or at least it hasn't gotten the same sort of recognition that other types of genres have. Montu, can you start?
Yeah, and I mean, we used to say that, but right now I'll say Athens is getting known for its hip hop community. I mean, we've had to fight our way to just being seen, but it's one of those things where we're used to fighting, so we just got to do what we got to do, and just doing hip hop, being a hip hop person here in Athens it's not been easy, but you know we've made our way. It's sort of like we we are the voice of the people. Like all these problems that they say that's going on in Athens, from the high poverty, low income, affordable housing. These are all the things that a lot of the hip hop community like that is them. It is a part of them. So it's like you're gonna hear it in the music, you're gonna see it on stage. It's just a part of what's going on. So as far as this almost this it's not a new movement, but this movement that's going on in Athens, where there's a lot going on in Athens right now. Hip hop has always been a part of that struggle. We've always been here. All the way going back to pre 2000 when I got here. It's like there's always been a struggle here, but now we're trying to use our voice to actually like look at Mariah. Mariah is, I call her the hip hop commissioner. We got hip hop on the commission now. So we're making these changes, and it's not easy, but just scratching and fighting our way, just like hip hop has always had to do, just like Black people have always had to do, is exactly what we're doing here in Athens. And I'm a hip hop artist in the sense that I get on stage, but I don't do what a Mariah or a Caulfield or a Blanco does, because they get on stage and they are actually our voice. They are what's called a griot, like they tell our stories. So it's a beautiful thing going on. And I always say with Athens hip hop, it's sort of like a buffet table, because we have a little bit of everything. It's not just one style. Where we coming from, whether you have trap music, nerdcore, some hardcore rhymes, Amun Ra, taking it to the hieroglyphs. Like it's just a beautiful thing that goes on here in Athens. So I don't know, hip hop in Athens is on the rise, and it's one of those things. Of course, we would have had to fight our way to being seen, because we've had to fight our way to being seen since we've been here. So it's just one of those things we continue to fight. We're going to continue to fight, and a lot of great things are going on right now with working with the university. Bunch of hip hop being created all over town, like some downtown, some not downtown. Some people know, some people don't know. So hip hop is kind of uh, the voice of the movement, and it always has been, and we're going to continue to do it. And like you said, Mariah, Rom, he actually stole that from Chuck D, because Chuck D said, hip hop is the CNN in the hood. Like that's what it is. Like, but it ain't just the hood. I mean, that's where I think sometimes we get lost in hip hop. It's gutter, it's urban, it's this. No, we're everything. We're all that. It's hip hop on the university. It's hip hop in the boardrooms. It's hip hop at McDonald's. It's hip hop at we're a little bit of everywhere. So it's time for Athens to not even just recognize hip hop, but recognize the people here, recognize the Black people and the actual struggle, and that's what I think we try to do with the movement we have going on, and we actually um, interweave it with education and politics and everyday living. So it's a beautiful thing going on right here.
There's something you said, Montu, that I think is really important that I wanted to emphasize. You talked about the fight to be seen, and I think if any couple words could describe what hip hop is and what hip hop means to me, excuse me, I would say that to capture the fight to be seen. I mean, in my work, trying to carry on the legacy of the early heads that were pioneering this genre in doing this kind of non-conventional community organizing I described in the first thing I had to say. Fighting to be seen in the streets, fighting to be seen in the venues, fighting to be seen for who we are, fighting to reclaim our narratives is central to the soul of what hip hop is, and especially within a town like Athens. I remember when I first moved here, 2013, 2014, I had a white guy tell me that Athens is a white town. And I didn't realize that at that moment that it was about who that person was choosing to see. When he walks down the street every day, the corridors he frequents, the places where he works, his social circle, because people of color have been systemically marginalized and historically marginalized in the city back around the era of emancipation. Athens Clarke County was 50% Black people, mostly newly freed slaves. But because of capitalist pressures on the housing market, due in large part to the University of Georgia and the way it has prioritized students, most of whom come from money, a lot of our people get pushed out. And so hip hop has been a really rich site of us fighting to be seen in this town in particular, to take up space in the venues that 10, 15, 20 years ago might not have had hip hop shows, but people like Montu fought to ensure that we had those platforms to tell our stories. Complexifying what it means to be Black, or what it means to be from the hood, through the stories that we tell. You listen to Celine Hayes talk about motherhood and mental illness. You listen to Squale talk about coming up, wanting to be successful, despite being held back by poverty, by criminal record, etc. You hear people like Sun Tzu display a linguistic dexterity that you wouldn't expect out of hip hop, to show that that's what hip hop can be too. That's what being identifying what the streets can look like. And then in my own work, trying to destigmatize things like access to reproductive justice, access to reproductive health care, all the different things it means to be a person of color. And through the music, fighting to be seen for who I am, as much as my colleagues in the art form are fighting to be seen for who they are as well. So I think that's broadly true of hip hop, but I think in microcosm can be very clearly seen in Athens, Georgia as well.
And you cannot separate you can't separate hip hop from what's going on just with this whole movement, because it's like I think back and I just did some research, and there was this one of the first female hip hoppers in Athens was this lady named Shannon Smith, and she was just saying how even back then she's fighting almost the same battles that's going on now, just trying to be heard as a woman in just society. So I say that to say a lot of times people even get lost in even in Athens hip hop, thinking, okay, Athens hip hop is just what goes on downtown, just what I can see, just who I know. But it's this vast like culture that's going on, like just pockets that you can see, pockets you can't see, and all we're trying to do, every one of us, from Lingua to myself to everybody, is just create these paths, create these platforms for everyone to be heard, for the voiceless to be heard.
Andrea, Mariah just said something about capitalist pressure, and you've written about the impact that commercialization has on the artistic content of some rap lyrics. You've written, quote, "Artists' images are constructed and marketed for maximal financial profit. One consequence of commercialization is that artist images and lyrical narratives are not necessarily truthful, but they're constructed to sell a commercially viable, entertaining product appealing to the widest possible consumer audience, regardless of truth or accuracy." So Andrea, can you talk more about the rule of truth or accuracy and how it plays out in rap music?
Sure. Thank you. I'm engrossed just listening to Montu and Mariah talk. So, I'll have my fan moment, but I'm happy to weigh in on this. So I think one of the things that struck me first when I began doing this research was, I'm a little older than most people on the panel, but I was around sort of in the early years of hip hop, right? And when I first saw this issue in the early 2000s, I was thinking, look, I understand what Chuck D said about, hip hop rap is the Black CNN. And that's true. It gave a voice and a platform for many people who had been otherwise excluded, who weren't recognized, who weren't seen, to express themselves, to talk about what's going on in their communities, to talk about important social and legal issues for them. But at its core, still, hip hop or rap is fictional, right? It's a fictional art form. It's a fictional musical genre, like all other fictional genres. That doesn't mean that truth and reality aren't somehow embedded or kernels in what's being represented, but it does just remind us that this is an artistic art effort. It is a creative endeavor. Just like other fiction authors do research, right, so that they can tell stories that are more believable to the reader or more relatable to the reader, right? The same is happening here in rap, right? Artists are taking their personal experiences, the experiences of others, the experiences of what's going on in the community, what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're feeling, right? They're talking about present and past, and they are weaving that into a song, right? Into a lyrical version of what life is about. They're telling relatable, universal stories. And so, I think there are many who have a very simplistic or primitive view of rap. They just think it's, some, ordinary person just rhyming over a beat, right? That it's all about, can you rhyme the last word of any particular line, right? There's no sophistication to it, right? Anybody can do it. I used to get so annoyed back in the day, for example, when I saw Karl Rove, right, rapping. When I see people who just want to rap because they think, well, anybody can do it. Everybody can do it. Anybody can do it. It's not that hard. It really perplexes me, and it really angers me. Because again, it is an art form, a creative endeavor like any other. And even if there are kernels of truth or aspects of truth or reality, right, it is still primarily fictional. And so I think that is one of the most important aspects that should be considered. And certainly the other aspects should be considered just in terms of the poetics or the artistic devices that are involved, right? Montu and Mariah as creators can speak more to this, but right. I think people often mistake the fact that rappers often adopt alter egos or stage personas, right? That many songs and raps are done in the first person narrative, right? Which is not uncommon for raps. And that, of course, there's this notion of, authenticity, or, you want to, be more sort of colloquial about it, keeping it real. And so people embrace these three concepts in particular, right? The use of stage personas, right? First person narrative and keeping it real, and then assume that the artist or the author, right, is talking about themselves, right? And is talking about truth, right? When really, again, reminder, this is a fictional art form, a creative endeavor, and people are creating stories through their work. And even though they are using these artistic devices, these poetic devices, you can't just simply read it as literal truth and literal factual statements, actual statements. And so I think that's particularly important to keep in mind as we think about using rap or rap background or personas or videos as actual evidence, as real life fact that has enough weight to be used in a criminal legal process.
Mariah or Montu, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up like the fictional quality of hip hop, because I frequently think about artists whose work I admire because it is impressionistic, because they may not be telling the story. When I listen to Kendrick describe it in the gas station, that might not have happened, but it is still capturing an interaction that you might expect on a street corner somewhere down in Compton where he's from. And so this I think it actually speaks partially to a part of the art, the art of it, of being able to cobble together realities of the streets to create a picture that that may be fictional, but at the same time has a kernel of truth to it. Is something that I think that is is a part of the art form, and it's something that some of the best people in the game do really well. So I'm really glad that you captured that part of the reality of what hip hop is as a genre, Dr. Finnis.
100%. Like our creativity. You know, I mean, you have to remember, this art form was influenced, there was Donald Goines and Iceberg Slim and Blaxploitation and like all these great stories, because for so long we didn't have anyone telling our stories. Like no one was telling our stories. We had to watch like Gone with the Wind, or some old funky crazy Leave It to Beaver thing from back in the day. Whereas now we got people who are telling the stories that, like, when I look out my window, they're telling the story of what's actually happening outside my window. So to me, it's like, it's lovely. Like I can listen to trap and listen to these other things. These are our stories. Like I can actually like identify with this, in many different ways. So that's 100%. It's such a pure, like, creative art form that just, it gives me goosebumps, just because it's a part of the culture that, like, you're trying to criminalize, like, our creativity. Like you want to criminalize everything that we do. Like we can't talk, we can't walk, we can't breathe, we can't do anything. You're trying to criminalize all that. Like you're trying to make us just like we're all criminals. Like you want us all in jail. Like it's bad enough. Like the pipeline has just got like mass incarceration just out of control. But it's like, you want to just keep continuing that? Like why would you want to? Why? We understand why. I'm asking that question, but it's rhetorical. Like, we already know we live in a world with white supremacy everywhere. That's what it is. It's white supremacy trying to put us in a position where you're over there and down there, and that's it. And we're not going to do nothing but continue to fight back. It's a shame that we're still fighting these same battles decades after decades, and I almost say centuries after centuries, but I'm just saying, like, recently we just keep having to fight these same battles, and it's getting to a ridiculous point where these prosecutors are just really being lazy. They're being lazy, and you want to use someone, you want to go in someone's journal You want to go on someone's creativity. You want a picture that someone painted, and you want to use that to put them away for the rest of their lives. I mean, and it's absolutely ridiculous.
So Samantha, I'm sorry, can I speak just for a moment to this commercialization that you talked about when you read that quote, right? Because I think, right, one of the things that's happened again, right, rap is a completely creative endeavor that is at a level of sophistication that I think many people refuse to or are unable to understand. But what's being referred to when we spoke about commercialization was, right, the pressures of any right, of any product, any service, right, is always, right, if you want to make money, right, you have to deal with, right, what the marketplace wants, right? Like any other industry, the music industry or the rap industry, if you want to go slightly more narrowly, right, is top down, right? And so when industry executives, when those in the boardroom figured out that, what really sells, right? It's so-called gangster rap. And I love that Matu pointed out all the various genres and all the various artists in different genres, because it's much more complex now than to just talk about gangster rap as it developed in the early 90s, right? But this notion of rap that is particularly focused on violence or alleged criminality or drugs or certain lifestyles, that is what's primarily used in these cases. But when industry figured out that is what is particularly commercially successful, right? You can imagine, right? Most people don't want to be starving artists, right? There's lots of pressure to produce a particular sound in a particular type of song, in a particular lyrics, and have particular personas in order to, get the attention of major or even mid-level, but major labels, right? In order to really make it big, right? It is true, right? People like Jay-Z, right? They come out of the hood, right? And they're all the way, at the top, right? And so if you are, just new to the game, if you are an amateur artist, and if you really are trying to work your way up, work your way out, and what you see as a possible role model is someone who's made it out, right? You're going to follow that. And so that's what I mean by the commercialization. That becomes another added layer that's not about the artistic nature inherent in the music. It's not about the poetics of their artistic devices. It's about recognizing what's going to sell. And so that then creates an incentive to create a particular kind of music that people, again, for all the reasons we just talked about, think must be literal truth of that person, of what's happened to someone, rather than accepting it as a creative endeavor, a fictional endeavor, telling universal stories, right, rather than individual personalized stories.
If it bleeds, it leads. Like that's what it came down to. Like everybody loves a good gangster flick. Like if it bleeds, it leads. And once they learn that, and once they realize it, like okay, exactly like what you just said, like this is the stuff that's selling. Like this is what we're gonna throw all the money into. You know, so it's unfortunate, but that's what happened. And but it happened. I mean, it don't happen in every art form, but it's like that commercialization happens, and like it was kind of in a way our fault, but not our fault as hip hoppers, because we allowed so many other people to control our culture instead of us controlling ourselves, and not like we had any say in that because we wasn't invited to the round table, but at the same time, like it's time for us to take our culture back.
So turning back to the Knox case, immediately following this passage is this one. So despite hip hop, playing a revolutionary role in American history, rap music has been the subject of unique scrutiny in determining when speech constitutes a true threat of violence and thus falls outside the ambit of First Amendment protection, in part because of its close association with the Black men who historically have created it. So if you're not familiar with the different categories of unprotected speech under the First Amendment, true threats is one of them. But what Andrea writes about is more so the use of lyrics to prove non-speech offenses. So it's not so much, people being criminalized for the lyrics themselves. The lyrics are actually used to prove a non-speech offense. And so I'd like to share this passage that comes from a guide called Prosecuting Gang Cases, What Local Prosecutors Need to Know. So it says, perhaps the most crucial element of a successful prosecution is introducing the jury to the real defendant. Invariably, by the time the jury sees the defendant at trial, his hair has grown out to a normal length, his clothes are nicely tailored, and he will have taken on the aura of an altar boy. But the real defendant is a criminal wearing a do-rag and throwing a gang sign. Gang evidence can take a prosecutor a long way toward introducing the jury to that person. Through photographs, letters, notes, and even music lyrics, prosecutors can invade and exploit the defendant's true personality. Gang investigators should focus on these items of evidence during search warrants and arrests. Dean Dennis, or Andrea, you're shaking your head. How does that make you feel?
It was stunning when I found this, back in the day, early days of research. I was just I was floored. It is so apparent in its racism or use of racialized tropes that you don't even really need to describe it, right? It was so apparent to me that the prosecutor who wrote this and who was suggesting that lyrics can be used and trying to train and educate other prosecutors, one, believes that this particular art form, it can be used to define the character of Black men, right? That rap music lyrics, right, really are examples of or representation of the character of Black men, and implicitly, right, that they're criminal, hyper criminal, hyper violent, dangerous, right? Right, the prosecutor wrote this was understood racialized tropes and stereotypes and racist tropes and stereotypes of Black men, and nonetheless was still willing to use music and other evidence in pursuit of conviction. So I was literally on the floor sort of when I read this. I was like, if you need any other better evidence of that this is used as character evidence, it's used to rely on stereotypes and racial bias, express or implied or implicit or unconscious, this is it. I'll put him out there, right? This was a prosecutor who was a respected DA or ADA in Los Angeles. And he had, been responsible for many cases, many prosecutions. It's interesting to me that since, in the last, I forget exactly when, he left prosecution and is now a criminal defense attorney. And so every once in a while he's got a comment about, now being on the other side. But yeah, I was just floored. There's nothing you can tell me that is not represented in this and that needs any more explanation.
It's like their dog whistles just evolved, like they, instead of just, obviously they just can't come straight out and, call you certain things. So all they got to do is say, oh, Montu likes to wear his hat to the side, he's a criminal. I might have some jewelry on, or it's like certain things that, like, now those are dog whistles. Like, let's just call them what they are, just to piggyback this to something local, a couple years back, we're talking like some of the bars downtown, like some of the dress code violations that they had was like, they literally might as well just put a white only sign up there. You know what I mean? Like it was literally everything that Black people wear, and like everything, like do-rags, gawky jewelry, baggy pants. One of them actually had dreads. Like you couldn't come in there if you had dreads. So like these are new dog whistles, and it's absolutely ridiculous that we're still going through this. But it's like, just as the movement evolves, like so does white supremacy. Like they got some geniuses over there. Like they know what they're doing. Like their system is working brilliantly for them. Like this is how they designed it, and it's working perfect for them. So it's like, if you're still scared and looking at like if you're on the jury panel pool and you're asked these things and like inside your head, you have to unpack that to say like I think everyone who has these certain things are just automatically criminal. You know what I'm saying? Like with these blanket statements, it's ridiculous.
So let's take a look at how prosecutors have used specific lyrics in a prosecution. This case is New Jersey versus Vontae L. Skinner. So the prosecutor introduced these lyrics to prove that Mr. Skinner had a motive and intent to kill, to prove attempted murder. Any impressions? Are there any conventions here that look like, you know, they would describe a very particular crime? Are there any lines here that sound like just, you know, conventions of rap that are not factual in nature? What are you seeing?
Me?
Anyone?
I mean,
Sure,
this is somebody's, you know, this is what they say, this is what they do. Like, you know, the kids, it, I mean, you gotta look at it like you gotta look at it like this in certain aspects. Like, you know, it's like having a good movie. You know, like Raekwon from the Wu-Tang Clan, like they do all these, but while they was doing like this Gambino rap where it was like all these Italian stories but turning them black, right? So like these are just this is just someone being creative. Like you can't take somebody's creativity and just like turn it against them. And when I say creative, that's like they're adding like their experience, maybe experience they saw, maybe something they saw on TV. Like some of these rappers don't. I'll even go for as far as say most of these rappers, 90% of what they're saying is just all garbage. Like it, and when I say garbage, I mean it's not real. You know, I mean, you have to deal with this thing where in our community, like to be you got to be authentic. You got it like it's the keeping it real. Like so the realer you can get, like then that it go to extremes. You know what I mean? So to me, this is just you know you can't use what somebody says in a rhyme in a hip hop song in a rap song to like use it against them. So like to even put that up there, it's like you know like I don't know. It's again, it's the prosecution being lazy and feeling. I mean, and they doing their job. They trying to paint this picture of this person, but like there's certain things you just shouldn't be able to do. You know, I mean, I don't know the law like that, but I do know like certain times where like even if you admit to a crime, like it all depends. But it's like they're being able to add these things to like their prosecuting thing of what how they want to get people convicted, and it's like, oh, I can use that too. Like, look what he said, you know. But they're not. Like, what about the rhymes? People might say, I got $1 million worth of jewelry. They ain't really got $1 million worth of jewelry, so they probably didn't really kill nobody, man. Like it's. Excuse me if I get a little hype because this topic, you know, it really like it gets under my skin. Like it really gets under my skin because there's so many black men that's um that's locked up or potentially getting locked up or just being scared because like they're definitely criminalizing everything we do, even down to our creativity and our culture. So I know I'm getting a little hyped and probably over talking a little bit, but it's getting to be the point where it's just absolutely ridiculous and we got to do something about it.
So I love that Montu said, right, sort of Gambino rap, right? This is, to me, so generic, right? This could be any mafia movie, any violent movie, any gangster movie, any action movie, right? If you look at what's written here. And so right, you're just telling a universal story, right? This is not a new story. It's not an uncommon story, right? It's one that most people understand and relate to. It's also, so in that sense, it's really generic, right? So a lot of times what we'll see are these lyrics that are being used by the government, and We had suggested that if you looked at 10 different artists' portfolios, right, their lyrics, their songs, right, you could probably find the same themes, the same concepts, the same words, right? Because, right, there is, in some respects, a formula, right, but in many respects not. But the point is, right, there are just common themes and approaches and ways of writing, the same as in any other art form, right? And the other point was, and I think, Samantha, you're particularly familiar with this. In this particular case, there were just pages and pages of these lyrics that were introduced
15.
in this trial, and they had no real connection with the actual alleged facts. Right. Again, the lyrics here are pretty generic, and they didn't match at all the facts or suggest anything about the particular alleged facts in the case. And so we see that happening a lot, that they're just being used to try and prove some sense of motive, right? A violent motive or a violent character, which would suggest an intent to kill. And so, right, really generic, really common, right, really representing a common story that most people could see in other different art forms, films, books. You could read the same stories. And so that was, this is, particularly troubling in that respect. I will say, though, to some extent, though, these aren't even, they've got a few one curse word and one N word, right? These are not even the most sort of potentially offensive lyrics you might see in terms of the use of
Right.
curse words and the use of very violent imagery and the N word. So you can imagine when the songs are even more aggressive in their language choices, their word choices, right? What impact that has on jurors.
And then, and in this case, he had written these rhymes like years before the crime even took place. So it's like, not only are you using these rhymes, not only these rhymes have nothing to do with the crime, these are years before. So like, you can just bring these things in and like, okay, we're just gonna paint this picture of this person. Look, this is what look at what's inside his mind. Like, look, this is how he thinks. This is a criminal. This is someone who's deviant. Like, come on, man. Like, he's being creative. He's being to in his community, probably he's being authentic. Like, he's keeping it real, just to keep it on a basic terms. Like, this is what they do. Like, this is, and don't get me wrong, like, we all know it, but that's just with any art form. Like, yeah, there's gonna be some truth in some people's stuff. But like, it ain't just a bunch of, criminals out here like, oh, I'm gonna go shoot somebody and then rhyme about it. You know what I mean? Like, come on, man. Like, let's actually do your job, prosecutor. Do your job. Do your job. Quit being lazy and just think you can just throw this stuff in here and like, you want to just hang them high, like, so we can use whatever we want. You can't use whatever you want. We got to stop this. We got to whatever means we got to do to stop them from like criminalizing our culture and like using rap lyrics. Like, this is where we're at. This is where the American justice system is at right now. Where you using you ain't got nothing else. Now you trying to use rap lyrics to send these brothers to jail. Come on, man.
So here's another example in state of Maryland versus Lawrence Montague. So in this case, Mr. Montague was charged with killing someone after they used a counterfeit bill to buy cocaine from him. And so the prosecutor argued that the use of the word play here, here it is, the use of the word play referred to this person using a counterfeit bill. And the reference to a 40 here was right on point with the 40 caliber handgun that was used in the alleged crime. So that's just one more way that lyrics have been used in a recent case. So a common argument that defense attorneys will make in these kinds of cases is that the evidence doesn't actually have to do anything with the charged crime. The prosecution is just introducing this evidence to prove that the defendant is morally reprehensible. The evidence bears only on the defendant's abstract beliefs and nothing more. And the defense made this argument in a criminal case before, the Georgia Supreme Court in the case of Georgia versus Courtney Boring. In that case, Ms. Boring was on trial for murdering her mother, and the prosecution introduced quotes and inscriptions found around her room, including these lyrics from songs by Marilyn Manson and Insane Clown Posse. And the court held that there was no relation between these lyrics and the facts of the crime, since, so a big part of the prosecution's theory was that because she had, these lyrics in addition to satanic inscriptions on her wall, that gave her depravity of mind that led her to murder her mother. But the court held that there was no relation between these lyrics and the facts of the crime, since it didn't appear that her mother had been killed in a satanic ritual or anything like that. And so the Supreme Court decided that the trial court had erred in admitting these lyrics, and it overturned Ms. Boring's conviction. But as we can see, the same very tenuous relationship exists in a lot of these rap on trial cases, and yet courts don't seem as willing to find that courts have erred in admitting the lyrics. So, any thoughts on this case?
So yeah, this just reaffirms what I talk about in the book. We are often asked, well, what about country music? What about metal music, right? Those have lots of the same themes and imagery and stories. Aren't they used in cases? And our response is always, look, it's rare that we have seen that the government seeks to introduce lyrics. And in the instances in which they do, it's often a different outcome, and certainly the number of instances in which they seek to admit lyrics of other musical genres is rare, right? It's nowhere near to the magnitude what we see with respect to rap lyrics, and the sort of aggressiveness of the government's arguments are nowhere the same level as with respect to rap music. As well. So we have not come across a case involving country music. Every once in a while, such as what you showed here, you'll see one involving either metal music or hard rock or horrorcore, right? Which, depending on your perspective, is a form of rap or a genre of rap or something else, right? But again, nowhere used to the same extent or in the same way. And certainly not relying on racial tropes and stereotypes and narratives at all as well. The one genre we have seen, musical genre that we have seen admitted more frequently are what are called narco corridos. And I apologize for all my Spanish speakers out there. I can't roll my R's, never have been able to, but which are Mexican folk ballads, right? And really by their essential nature, were meant to be sort of non-fictional songs about the exploits of Mexican drug cartels and Mexican drug dealers. So by their nature, in contrast to rap, narco corridos were meant to be nonfiction. They were supposed to talk about actual real life exploits. And the government has, in some instances, we found cases admitted these Mexican folk ballads and analogize them to rap. And so I think they just believe it's all the same, whereas rap comes out of a very fictional, creative background. Narco corridos come out of a very non-fictional, much more journalistic background. And so, yeah, I think people are sort of looking, they're stretching, and I think rightly they're asking, why not country? Why not metal? And we haven't seen that.
At all. And it's funny because I watched this show, I don't know, maybe a year ago. It was this cartoon show. It was something about on a tour bus, and they had this country season, right? And like these country boys was wild back in the day. Like some of them like committed murders and like was like some really like bad boys, like outlaws, you know what I mean? But even then, like, nah, because country is quote unquote is white. Like, so that's just them telling a story. It's like I read about a study where I think a young lady like had country lyrics and was like, you know, if this was if this was black person, it's a criminal. If this was country, it's oh, they're just country lyrics. I mean, I can't remember the specifics of it, but it's just like this is, you know, it's mountain of evidence that it's just such an obvious path to what's going on.
So one of the arguments frequently made by people writing about the phenomenon of rap on trial is that the prosecutorial use of rap lyrics can lead to what in the First Amendment world is called a chilling effect, when the negative impact of a certain kind of speech or expression can lead to a speaker's watering down their message in some way or result in them stopping from engaging in that speech at all anymore. Did we lose Mariah? I think she said she.
Yeah, I think she had to go.
Okay. So Montu, this is for you. Speaking of this chilling effect, has anyone ever told you to maybe tone down your lyrics in some way or to change the content of your lyrics in some way out of fear that you might, I don't know, offend somebody or get yourself in trouble? My question for Mariah was, you know, whether when she ran for county commissioner, whether someone had ever asked her to tone down her message. So have you ever experienced or witnessed anyone who experienced something like that?
So you know, I don't rap. I do more, you know, the behind the scenes stuff, getting them on there and introducing them and that kind of thing. But so I've had to be in situations where it's an obvious edit where like, okay, at Hot Corner Festival, because there's families out there, you know, I can't have a bunch of trap rappers up there talking certain things. So in those kind of situations, yeah, because you have family environments, you have environments that can just be raw, you know. So no, but at the same time, just in full transparency. So King Blanco, his senior year of high school, he had this this line he wanted to do during the Black History Month event, and he had this thing about Trump, and it was anti-Trump basically. And then it gets back to the people. They ask him to write the lyrics down, whatever. And they say, okay, you can do the song, but you just can't do it with the Trump stuff in it, right? Because this is school, you know, politics, whatever. He comes to me and asks me, like, should I not do the lyrics? In full honesty, I tell him, no, don't do the Trump thing, like, you know, because you'll have it where they won't have hip hop on stage no more, and this, that, whatever. So he does it. So he's like, you know, forget Montu, forget everything. Like, so he does it, right? He ends up getting put in school suspension, and then all of a sudden, you know, the kids do these days on IG. It was like this whole thing that popped. So it was like at the end of the day, like 100 kids walked out of the school talking about free King Blanco. So, you know, I think we're always asked, and I know that it's kind of a political situation because it's in school and whatnot, but I think artists are asked that sometimes, you know, and it is wrong, you know, unless it's a situation where it's like some family stuff. It's like you should, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think you should be scared to like express yourself how you want to express yourself. You know, I mean, I get what's going on, and I get that, you know, that maybe stuff should be toned down. I think in the foreword, Killer Mike even said something about like, you know, maybe the you know, the youngsters should be a little bit more conscious of like what they're saying and whatnot. And I don't agree with that. Like, I just say do what you do, and we just I feel like we have to fight this battle. Like we can't keep getting pushed back and just like, why should we have to change because y'all created this system that where y'all want to like throw us in jail and criminalize us? Like, I don't like. Let's fight this battle and not change. Let's not change our lyrics. I mean, let's have to deal with like again some family environment type stuff. But if not, then nah, just keep it raw. Keep it raw, rugged. Do whatever you however you want to say it. You say it. You know what I mean? Like it's a part of it's what it is. You know, it's rebellious. Like, you know, NWA F the police. Like, you know, we're rebellious. Like that's what we do. Like it's. And we have to have this voice and be rebellious because of the system that exists. It's like, you know, you can't let the system change us and we're trying to rebel against the system. Like, I don't agree with that. So
You mentioned the family structure, and so I want to, here's Mariah. And so I wanted to ask you about a piece that you wrote a few years ago, kind of referencing maybe a few different genres of rap. And so when we're looking at rap on trial cases, as Andrea said, it tends to be, you know, the lyrics that are really, you know, violent or explicit or, you know, sexual in some way. But you say that there is this other genre where people are not so much writing about that. And so can you speak to this dichotomy, or maybe it's, you know, much, I'm sure it's much more complex than, you know, just two sides, but the fact that, you know, there are conscious rappers and other rappers who are writing about, you know, political issues, and maybe they're not doing it in a way that is so explicit as, you know, NWA does. But it's not so much those rappers whose art is being used against them as much as the more violent stuff. Can you talk about that a little?
well, some it's not being used. Those type of lyrics are not being used, say, in like in court, right? But like when you have like a Dead Prez, or like certain times Public Enemy, or, you know, Poor Righteous Teachers, and some of this conscious rap, like it can also be radical to the point where it's something that they don't want to hear. Like they do want it changed. So you're right. It's not as like I guess the difference would be maybe the violence and misogyny and some other things, but it's like it's still just as radical, like just in a different way. You know what I mean? So um most of what we have is people who are just trying to express themselves in some kind of way. And that might be expressing themselves against the system. Whereas, like, let's say a conscious rapper will express themselves against the system by maybe, you know, uh, 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 having lyrics that's like against the system and talking about, you know, white supremacy and talking about like all these other issues. You might just have somebody on the other side that just says straight up F the police. It's really the same message. It's the same exact message, but like this person just expresses himself different. But if you think about it, like, I mean, hip hop is, we're all unique. Like, forget hip hop, the world, we're all individuals. So I'm going to express myself one way because this is like my experience. This is where I came from. This is how I learned to express myself. And someone else is going to do it different. Like a Talib Kweli is going to do it different than, say, you know, I don't know who one of the young boys is nowadays, but somebody who's like on the trap rap side of it. So it's the same message, it's just said differently. But like, they're not necessarily, well, I hope it don't happen. I hope it doesn't start to happen, but they're not taking like really super conscious rappers and like using those lyrics against them, you know, like, oh, it just, because it's said in a different way. It was, but when you add that violent element to it, and then it gets in criminology, and like it gets into all that, it's like now that's something different. But what they don't understand is it's all hip hop. Like they want to have this line and separate it, but it's like it's all one movement that's really like rebelling and bucking against the system, like rebelling against police brutality, you know, and mass incarceration and all these issues. You know, you might hear a trap rapper saying it one way, like, you know, he might have a story about him going to prison and then his life in prison, whereas you might have a conscious rapper that talks about the school to prison pipeline and this, that same message, you know. So yeah.
So central to this whole conversation is that rap music and the artists who make it are subject to much higher scrutiny than artists of other art forms. And I wanted to share this picture of an internal file memo from the New York Police Department's Enterprise Operations Unit about a concert by Remy Ma, and her attorney refers to the NYPD's Enterprise Operations Unit as the hip hop police. And she said, quote, "They're constantly stalking high profile rap artists and monitoring their every move." So we can talk as much as we want about, the content of an artist's lyrics, whether it's conscious rap, whether it's, misogynist, whatever. But when there are specialized police units dedicated to investigating rappers and people who attend rap shows just as fans, maybe our focus shouldn't be so much on instructing artists how to express themselves, but maybe it should be on something else.
Okay.
So yeah, this I love this new rebranding, Enterprise Operations Unit. So right, this hip hop task force out of New York police department began way back in the day, right? In the 90s, I think it was Derek Parker, right? He started as a one-man crew, just looking at this stuff, looking at rappers, and then it expanded to an actual unit and expanded beyond New York to most major cities throughout the US, developed their own similar units or task forces. And so this has been going on much longer. Remy Ma is maybe, 2018, a few years ago, right? It's just, she's one of the more recent artists being surveilled. It's interesting because she's female, right? It tends to be mostly the male artists being surveilled, although I think maybe other artists have also, female artists recently have complained about also being surveilled. So this, right, it's not new. It's almost as old as rap. Mariah took us back in the day, the beginnings of rap or hip hop, which included rap, break-in, graffiti, right? All of those were initially surveilled by NYPD back in the 70s and the 80s, right? And all we did was modernize it, right? By the time Derek Parker comes along and starts his unit, right? He's just modernized it. He's got notebooks and expands to, a unit, right? And then in modern times, it expands to online surveillance. And so what we see in many cases now are law enforcement units and individual officers, but basically sitting online, monitoring what's going on in social media, Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, IG, any other new platform that I'm just not even familiar with, probably TikTok by now. They're just looking for either particular videos or songs or lyrics, or they're looking at people whom they've identified and they're looking for connections to other people. And so they have moved to even online surveillance. And so, like much of what we talk about in the criminal legal system and treatment of Black folk, this is just a modernization of a very old practice and tactic that continues today. So, along with, artists thinking about what they create, what they write, what they put out there and perform, right? It's also, what are they putting on social media? What's out there? That can also be found.
100%. Yeah, I can't add nothing to that. I was gonna, you said it, but I was gonna say I was gonna talk about. I know they had I've read about the task force that they had against like all the graffiti writers back in the day, and then when hip hop got started, it was like, okay, a lot of the graffiti writers was b-boys, was MCs, so like really it was really just a task force against our culture. Like you said it, yeah, and it's always been there, like, which is, yeah.
So I guess now would be a great time to open it up for audience questions, if there are any.
Well, we're waiting on that, Samantha. Let me just add one thing, because you had been hoping to ask Mariah about whether when she ran for office, whether she had gotten any sort of backlash or question, or even maybe not even backlash, but questions about, right, her creative works. So I don't know if some people are familiar. There was a candidate in 2018 in New York, Antonio Delgado, who was running for, I forget what he was running for. I should remember what position he was running for, a congressional candidate. And he had in the past had a rap career, maybe an amateur, maybe he was, a career, or he had done some writing, right? And during the course of his campaign, the GOP counterparts or other sides started running ads talking about, he essentially, he shouldn't be our representative. He's, had this rap career and he's talked about all these things and they were offensive. And so they used his rap career or his creative works against him during the campaign. So if you're interested in more, you can look him up. He was Antonio Delgado out of New York.
Thank you for that. I didn't know about that.
Oh, so we do have one in the Q&A.
So I wrote right questions in the chat.
Yeah, I know. I see the Q&A here. Do you foresee this issue expanding to female rap artists? Potentially. So in the cases we've examined, the hundreds of cases we've examined and heard about, the vast majority of these are young men, right? Every once in a while, we do come across a case involving a female defendant. It doesn't seem to be the case that often she is the person who allegedly authored the lyrics. She often seems to be associated with someone who might have authored some lyrics. And so we haven't seen it expand yet. Certainly, I think just as we're talking about Remy Ma being surveilled, right? I can imagine Megan Thee Stallion and others being surveilled. So I would imagine that there are some female rap artists who have been surveilled and will continue to be surveilled. But maybe it's just sort of the nature of the demographics of the industry or the particular targets of the criminal legal system focused on men, that we just haven't seen it expand. I could envision it expanding, but we just haven't seen that yet.
And yeah, and let's just be real, like it's a black men are in the crosshairs. So I mean, that's what they worry about right now. Like the prisons aren't being filled up with black women, I mean, so yeah, you're right. It could expand there, but like that ain't where it's going. They want these black men. They want to continue this pipeline. So they don't even go after black women as hard on other stuff. So it's like, and I'm in no way, shape, or form saying that black women get a pass. That's not what I'm saying. So don't take me wrong on that. I'm just saying right now it's a war against the black man in America, and that's what they fight. So.
Here's another one. Have you all discussed the art imitating life versus life imitating art conversation in the context of rap or hip hop? Is there a clear distinction? What comes first?
I've had this conversation a lot, man. I mean,
no, Brad, you're an artist too, so yeah, you could weigh in. I mean, I do think it's dynamic. I don't think it's right. They are
a two-way street.
Right. It's a two-way street. They are intersecting. They are affecting each other. Right. There's a feedback loop. Right. Pick your metaphor. Because, yeah, I mean, I think there's absolutely a feedback loop, a dynamic relationship between the two. Rap and life, rap in the criminal legal system, right? I think even more narrowly. And I would, to your second question, is there a clear distinction? I think that to me is fundamentally the problem, right? Is that there is not a clear distinction between the creative aspects and the real life, actual, potentially truthful aspects, right? And there is no good process or way in the criminal legal system of trying to separate that out, right? Even beginning to think about how to separate that out. And so that's why I think it's problematic that we're using them. If you could separate them, which I'm not sure you can, I don't think we have a good process right now to do that.
Okay, here's a combined question from two people. What needs to be done to stop this kind of discrimination? And are there more direct approaches to solving these issues aside from just educating people about the culture, because that seems like a heavy burden to place on artists and scholars?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to answer this one. I know Andre, like that's on you. Like I know that's your world studied. So like and in fact, that's a good question for me to ask you, because like what can we do? Like what can we do?
I mean, I think, so the book, I'll put a plug in for the book, right, offers a number of suggestions. If I could really dream big, and we don't propose this in the book, if I could really dream big, it would be that prosecutors would abandon this tactic. I mean, I think that fundamentally has to be what happens. But I am reticent to think that will actually happen. I just don't think that that's something they're wholesale, the whole sort of, prosecution community is going to be willing to do. And so, we look for other remedies, right? We would love for legislatures to pass some sort of statute that gives some sort of protection to rappers, but other creatives as well, that prevents this type of tactic and strategy. We do think jurors have a role to play, which is, if you're sitting in a decision of a case that involves lyrics, right, you have your discretion to decide whether to accept or reject the particular piece of evidence. Once it comes to you as a juror, I mean, you have to be willing to think about, accepting and rejecting. You can't just wholesale say, I'm not going to do it, but I'm not going to follow the law. But you have that discretion as well.
And you're right. And just to piggyback off what you're saying, I think it falls in line with, people just being able to unpack like their biases and their stereotypes and all that kind of thing. So when they're sitting, in a jury pool and in these situations where you're right. To me, we're talking about this now. So you need to do that with like lyrics, but you need to do that. You have to unpack all that. And sometimes that's heavy lifting for people, but it has to be done to, you can't just look at this brother right here and just all that, automatic stereotypes, automatic things is popping off in your head. Like you have to fight them, because otherwise you already found him guilty just by looking at him or just by reading something that he wrote. Like you already found him guilty. You ain't hear no evidence or nothing, and you found him, he's guilty. So we have to unpack all that, like, to get rid of them. Get rid of them things that's stopping us. And we all got some heavy lifting to do, like all of us do. Like, but people need to start unpacking and like really understanding what kind of biases they actually have when you're walking around every day, and that includes all of us, because some of the things that we say to each other, like as Black people, so like we have to start unpacking some of this stuff and like really moving forward.
So another question is, a lot of the book and conversations today center on using rap lyrics in gang cases. What about when lyrics detailing rape or sexual assault are used in prosecuting sex crimes? Where other evidence is not as readily available, are the sentiments the same?
So yeah, these are the hard questions. These are the ones that test your perspective and your thinking. So let me respond in two ways. One is that we haven't come across many cases involving rape or sexual assault. I have seen a few cases involving human trafficking in which the defendant is alleged to be a pimp and have trafficked some victims, and there are lyrics or songs which talk about sort of sex or trafficking, but they don't particularly detail they don't necessarily detail a particular sexual assault or rape. So I would say the reason we focus on gang cases or violent crime cases or drug cases is because those are the overwhelming numbers of cases that we're seeing in comparison to rape or sexual assault cases. And so though, but to the more sort of, complex question, right? And maybe the person is asking, are my sentiments and perspectives the same, or maybe they're just asking that more broadly. But I think, in terms of consistency, right? I would take a consistent perspective, right? And that it would be troubling in any type of case involving any particular alleged conduct for the same reasons. And I don't think those reasons fall away in the case of Black men and sexual assault crimes, because there are plenty of stereotypes and tropes and racist narratives about Black men and hypersexuality and misogyny And so those concerns we have about, character evidence and painting defendants with particular personalities, right, I think equally apply, right, in terms of concerns. And I think also to the extent, because the comment here says where other evidence is not as readily available, I'm particularly concerned when lyrics are, right, the primary evidence used in a case, right? That is particularly troubling to me. If you don't have other evidence, if you don't have any other evidence, and this is the primary evidence that you're relying on, that I think can be fairly unreliable and fairly damaging, I also have particular concerns about that. So I think the short answer is, my perspective and sentiments are likely to be the same.
Same. Yeah, we just can't use the lyrics. I mean, and don't get me wrong, like, me as a 45-year-old, have 5 kids, like, I try to guide my children to at least understand what's going on and understanding certain lyrics and these things. It just isn't my job to say you as a 15, 16-year-old should only say this. Do I want to guide you to maybe be more conscious or say it in a better way? 100%. But at the same time, like, if you're going down that, we was all young, so you need to, I'm trying to guide you, but at the same time, I'm not going to handcuff you to the point where you're not saying what you really want to say. Like, if we're waiting till when someone's writing the lyrics for them to try to change, like, their mentality, that's it's too late. Like, we got to catch them earlier and younger.
So we're right at 8:30. David or any members of the ACS team, if you want to hop on and say goodbye, you're welcome to. But if not, I want to say a big thank you to all of our speakers, Andrea, Montu, Mariah. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for all of the attendees who came and who asked your very thoughtful questions. Here is the book that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
this whole time. It's great. I'll have to get mine signed as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you again. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Samantha.
Yes, 100%. Thank you. Are we done? Well, like, I didn't want to, like,
Yeah, I don't know. David, are you there?
maybe they're gone.
Yep. No, I'm here. No,
change some stuff around. No, just thanks everyone for doing this. I think it went really well. I think obviously well received, and it's as I think some of the questions showed, it's something that people are, I think, probably in a lot of cases weren't aware of, but found the discussion really valuable, and looking for the path forward. So thank you, and we want to keep talking about these issues. So we'll take it up again in another time, I hope.
Right on.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank y'all.
Yep. Thanks again, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.